just sitting anywhere.
It's by random if they wanted to.
No, I can find everybody here.
There are no seats available, standing room only.
Why are you here?
I'm here because I want to fight for women's rights in their legal sense. I think women ought to be mothers and wives.
I'm here for, the main reason is for the sake of my grandchildren's future.
What do you think this rally will accomplish that will help your grandchildren?
I think that it's going to make people more aware of the things that we want to keep in the family makeup, things that our country was founded on.
What do you think this rally today will accomplish? Go ahead.
You mean you can really hit over this terrific crowd? Well, I think it will be a source of encouragement. It will buck the spirits of those of us who are working against the ERA. I'm sure that all of these people today will feel the same kind of spirit that we do when we go to Washington, when we bring 100,000 people to Washington against abortion in January. This is the kind of spirit you'll feel today.
Because I am against the ERA and I will stand up for God and family and home.
What do you think that this rally today will accomplish?
Well, I think it will let President Carter know that the views of the women at the IWY are not the views of all the women of America.
God, we thank you today for the liberties that have been characteristic of our country through the years. And Father, we pray today that thou wouldst deliver us from unreasonable men and women who would make license out of those wonderful liberties paid for by our forefathers. And Father, we pray today that as we have gathered for this significant meeting, that you would not only honor us with thine own presence, but that, Father, in addition to that, you would bring this meeting and the text of it to the attention of those who are our leaders in government, both in the judiciary and in Congress itself. And we pray that across this nation there shall come a new tide of movement for the cause that brings us together here today. Lord, we pray for special courage for the women who lead this particular session today, and we ask that you would bless them and lead them in all of their activities. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Sexes. It is not even the battle between women.
Though we have women divided into two different camps in Texas, in America today, what we're witnessing is the battle of philosophies. The values upon which this nation was founded were produced for its people by having its laws built upon the Word of God. And that has produced the greatest good for the greatest number in the world's history. Now we're being told by the IWY officials across town that they are under a federal mandate to remove the barriers that prevent women from full participation in society. Let me give to you an illustration. Have any of you ever walked to the top of a tall building and gone out on the observation deck and walked over to the railing and looked down upon the teeming activity below? Suppose that you should turn to the guide and say, "Why have you placed this barrier in my way?" He might say to you, "How foolish can you be? That isn't a barrier, that is a safeguard." Wise men and women in the past have carefully built into our system, sacrificially built into our system, certain safeguards. Now, in the name of, quote, progress, quote, equality, quote, the freedom to do your own thing, remove these safeguards and plunge us into social and moral destruction.
We are busy raising the consciousness of the public all over America. And we are in the business of raising the consciousness of our lawmakers in Washington. Now, very quickly, let me say to you, how has this been done? Petitions were circulated, or requests to the president have been circulated all over the United States by individuals, by organizations, by just plain people, passing the word from mouth to mouth. And as a result of that, all of these petitions that you see amassed up here have come in to the Houston Post Office box number. Some of you have brought them in today. We haven't even been able to count them. Or at last count, there were hundreds of thousands. I haven't even been able to get with the ladies today to see how many have been counted, and many of them have come in that have not been counted. Others have come in, I don't even have an estimate, maybe the ladies do, of how many thousands and hundreds of thousands there are today. These have been amassed upon the rostrum as you see today. They will later be sent to Washington, saying to our lawmakers, this is the sentiment of the majority of the people of America.
Thank you. I was speaking a few weeks ago on the subject of womanhood, and a girl came up to me and she said, "You know, I don't like some of the stuff you say about women." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. I mean, I just don't like to think of myself as a woman." I said, "What do you like to think of yourself as?" And she said, "As a person, just a person." And it was very obvious to me when I looked at that girl that she did not think of herself as a woman, and my heart went out to her because she has been sold a bill of goods. She has been told that there is something reprehensible about the distinction between the sexes, and that every effort must be made to obfuscate and to erase that distinction. I speak for thousands of Christian women who see sexuality as far deeper than a mere matter of biology. What we are told are mere stereotypes, socially conditioned, which must be abolished, I see as more like archetypes. That is, that they have a far deeper origin than sociology or politics. They originate in a creator God. We see the world and the human body not as ends in themselves, not as possessions to be done with as we choose, but as temples of the Holy Spirit of God. We are bought with a price. And so I stand here today. I stand here to make my declaration of dependence. Not as one who is incapable of what the world would call independence. I have been a missionary in the jungle. I went in 1958 to live with a savage tribe that had murdered my husband and 4 other missionaries. I have been a writer and a speaker and have had to support myself, having been twice widowed. But in those crises of my life, I have come to see the truth of Isaiah 43, verses 1 and 2. I, the Lord, have called thee. I created thee, formed thee, redeemed thee. Thou art mine. As Christian women, we ask for the right to be women, to live our lives in faithful obedience to the God who created us and who demonstrated the power of his love in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, who came to make us free. Submission does not mean weakness. Sacrifice is not servility. Femininity is not frivolity. Thank you very much. I don't like to have rallies such as this, and you may have noticed that I am a little bit weepy about it. I actually weep that we first have to have a rally such as this in America. The thing that we are weeping about is the mentality which is now in America. How did this happen? But we have a mentality in America which is anti-life and anti-family and anti-God. Why? Because we have a group of special interests who seem to think that that is to their interests. But we know that it is not to the interests of America or the people or the preborn child. And because we know it is not to the interests, we are a pro-life movement across the country, and we shall be heard despite the minority. You know, we have this beautiful symbol of the rose, a symbol of life, also a symbol of martyrdom. A martyrdom that is happening in America, where blood is actually flowing as babies are being killed in our hospitals and clinics. And that is the reason that we speak. Because as the children are being killed, we are creating a mentality in America which fails to recognize the value and dignity of each and every human being. You know what they do in abortion is they simply take the lovely baby from its natural habitat and they rip it out and they throw it away.
And that is what is happening in America. And so we speak and protect that child which is being killed even with our tax dollars against our wishes.
When you pray for America. In these closing days of troubled times, we see our nation crumbling. Mighty scholars are dumbfounded, and the one steadfast now stumbling. But within my heart there is a cry for a way that we must take. It's just a simple prayer request that I've just gotta make. That when you pray for America. Do you believe it? For God has promised to heal our land for the prayers of a righteous man.
Thank you. Thank you. On the way from the airport the other day, the cab driver obviously had just put out of his cab a group of homosexuals, and he turned to me and he asked me, "Are you gay?" And I said emphatically, "No, I'm not gay. In fact, I'm very, very unhappy." Right after I introduced legislation in the House of Representatives in Texas to bar homosexual groups off our college campuses, the vice president of A&M came to me very frantic, very nervous, and he said, "Clay, please help us." He said, "We ain't even used to girls yet." The night of the hearings, a little lady came to me and she said, "Clay, you ought to be ashamed of yourself." She said, "I fought for you, a black man, in Selma, Alabama." She said, "I was beaten over the head by country sheriffs and I was bitten in the rear by dogs." And I said, "I can tell." But I said, "Little lady, a dog bite only qualifies you to do one thing, and that's to run the 100-yard dash in 9 flat. I'm supposed to sit here and talk to you about civil rights. I have enough of that already. I have enough civil rights to choke a hungry goat. So it's not civil rights I desire in 1977. What I ask for is public rights, rights which are and rights which should be afforded every citizen alike. Mr. Carter, I ask for peace. I ask for victory over the perverts in this country. What do I want? I want what you want. I want peace in my community. I want a country that's strong in morals. That's what I want. Mrs. Ford, when she was asked by news people what was her reaction to the Supreme Court's decision on abortion, and she said, great, my leadership expressed joy in something so immoral. What are we coming to? It's time to call names now. You have to remind in fact, I'm tired of people going around here talking about the minority vote put Mr. Carter in office. It was the minority vote. It was not. It was a Christian vote. There'll come another time. There'll come another time. What I'm saying here today won't help me personally. It might not help me back in my district even. It might mean that I'll not be reelected to office. But it's time for men and women to begin obeying their God-given convictions of truth and of beauty and of honesty. Mr. Carter's got to stand up as I'm standing here today and say, I don't want to be reelected if I have to support the murders of unborn babies. I don't want to be president if I have to support homosexual activity.
Fellow Americans, friends for life and the family, I'm overwhelmed at seeing so many of you here today. I'm overwhelmed especially to be in the great city of Houston, back in the land of my birth, the state of Texas. And I am happy to represent the members of the National Right to Life Committee and its affiliated organizations in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. If they could, they would be here in Houston with you today. We are here joining you because in the Right to Life movement, we represent people from every economic background, every religious denomination, and some with no religious affiliation at all political philosophies, and some with no political identification at all. We are joined together by our common belief that the sanctity of life must be the foundation of our democratic society. And we would call upon the representatives of a free press to please give us a fair hearing. They are unwilling to accept the responsibility that freedom demands, and they cannot understand that liberty cannot be maintained without fairness and justice. By denying the right to life of the unborn child, they are denying themselves the right to womanhood. The mighty army of the people is on the move, and we will not retreat until we have pushed back every threat to the family that is the heart of our country. I truly believe in the great dream that is America, that it is a land with opportunity, that is a home for all, and that it must never be just an exclusive reservation for the perfect, the privileged, and the planned. But we will win this fight for life and the protection of our country. And when we do, that victory will not be for ourselves, but for God, for America, and all mankind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, dear friends. There are many differences between this meeting and the one in that other hall today. We started out by offering a prayer, and I think you should know that at that other meeting, they didn't have a prayer. They just started out with a moment of silence for fear they would offend many of their members who were present. I'm very proud that they excluded me from that convention, and I'm here where we're not ashamed and not afraid to ask God's blessing on this crowd assembled here today. But I do thank all of you for coming and for giving us here on the platform the thrill of seeing this marvelous crowd. I am informed that there are 15,000 inside and several thousand more who have unfortunately were turned away. At the very first meeting of the Commission on International Women's Year, they adopted an official resolution to urge and push for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment as their highest priority. They resolved, quote, to do all in their capacity to see that the Equal Rights Amendment is ratified at the earliest possible moment, close quote. Now, when you have $5 million to spend, all in your capacity is a lot indeed. I can tell you that if we had had $5 million, we would have buried it 5 years ago. The Commission on International Women's Year is a costly mistake at the taxpayer's expense. The whole thing was designed as a media event, a charade to go through the motions of these phony state conferences and national conferences in order to pass resolutions that were pre-written and pre-packaged a year and a half ago and published in June of 1976, and then after it was all over, to tell the Congress and the state legislatures that this is what American women want. By coming here today, you have shown that that is not what American women want. Several years ago, a study was made about the Equal Rights Amendment at the Drake Law School in Iowa, and they concluded that if the Equal Rights Amendment were ever ratified, it would encourage the legislatures and the state and the courts to adopt a wildly permissive role which would have the effect of driving the homemaker out of the home. This is what certain people want. And why would it do that? It would do that, first of all, because it would make unconstitutional any state law which makes it the obligation of the husband to support his wife and children. These laws are basic to the institution of the family. These are the laws which give to the wife her legal right to be in the home. These are the laws which give to the children their right to have a mother in the home. Some people do want this. The Equal Rights Amendment proponents do want that obligation to be sex equal. They do want to take the wife out of the home. They do want to get them in the workforce because then this will greatly increase the taxes and the bureaucracy of the federal government. Section 2 of the Equal Rights Amendment gives the whole enforcement power on the Equal Rights Amendment to the federal government. Why in the world would anybody want to give the Washington politicians and bureaucrats and judges more power than they now have when they can't possibly solve the problems they have already? The Equal Rights Amendment says you cannot discriminate on account of sex. And if you want to deny a marriage license to a man and a man, or deny a homosexual the right to teach in the schools or to adopt children, it is on account of sex that you would deny it, and that would be unconstitutional under ERA. We reject the anti-family goals of the Equal Rights Amendment and the International Women's Year. Contrary to their radical resolutions, the American people and the American women do not want ERA. They do not want abortion. They do not want lesbian privileges. And they do not want universal child care in the hands of the government. When I look out at this crowd today, I know that you have the energy and the dedication to defeat this assault on the family. If you cared enough to come here today, I know that you can do it. You can turn back this tide all across the country. If you stay with us, the Equal Rights Amendment will die 16 months from Tuesday. In order to have held the line for the last 5 years against the tremendous odds of White House lobbying, federal government expenditure, prominent people, and big money, we had to have somebody on our side who was more powerful than the President of the United States. But we need your help, and we can have another party on March 22nd, 1979, if you will put your energy to the task between now and then.
Senator Sam Erwin tried to introduce 2 amendments to this so-called Equal Rights Amendment to cushion, to soften, to protect your children and your grandchildren, your daughters and your granddaughters against involuntary combat conscription into the armed forces. Right there in black and white. And ladies and gentlemen, if you ever get your hands on the National Organization for Women Manifesto, does that name ring a bell? Manifesto. The revolution is now. They state very clearly what their intended goals are. They intend to draft your daughters and your granddaughters, and they voted down Senator Sam 4-1.
I was surprised to find out that in spite of this great message on the wall here from the United States, us, to the President and to the Congress, that I am the only congressman here. I cannot understand, with the good spirit in this great auditorium, why there aren't at least 10, 15, if not all 24, at least Texas congressmen and women here. I'm shocked. When I went over to that Albert Thomas Hall this morning as an official observer from the United States Congress to find out how our $5 million was being spent, I was not in the Congress that Christmas season when it was misappropriated. I was shocked again to find out that the only other 3 members of Congress there were on the stage lending their support to former Congressperson Bella Abzug. Again, I was the only congressman or woman who saw fit to observe rather than participate that squandering of money. Again, I was shocked. But may I tell you what shocked me most in that auditorium this morning? Not the lack of observing by those who spend our money so freely, but something far more tragic. I saw a young lady here holding up the greatest book in all of history, the Bible. I don't know what section she had it open to when that great state senator, Clay Smothers, was talking. But I think the young ladies here who have their Bibles with them already are aware that the strongest warning ever given to civilization from the mouth of the Son of God, Jesus Christ, is found in Matthew 18, when Christ said, "Whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, better to tie a millstone around your neck and drown yourself in the deepest sea." And I watched this morning the corruption of young people in Albert Thomas Hall. And the greatest tragedy of all was to see 3 former first ladies of this nation, 2 former first ladies and the current wife of the President of the United States, all sitting properly with their hands in their lap, dressed according to White House protocol, and standing by their very presence alongside of Abzug, approving of sexual perversion and the murder of young people in their mother's wombs. What a disgrace! They say that we gathered here for the American family in God's name are too negative. Well, I think that this is about the most positive group of people I've ever been with in my life. I have never seen so many lovers in the best sense of that word in all of my life. I see people who love God. I see Jews who love Moses and respect Mosaic law. I see American citizens who really love their country. I see children who love their parents. I see Texans who love Texas, Californians who love California and Texas too. I see people who are in love with themselves in the proper sense of their word because they know what human dignity really is all about. I see black citizens, and I've heard 2 of the most eloquent and articulate black citizens I've ever heard in my life, Dr. Jefferson and Senator Smothers, telling other black citizens that black mothers must not be shocked and frightened and intimidated by the state into executing in the warmth of their wombs that preborn child that they love. I have seen citizens who love the 201 years of tradition that our forefathers and foremothers have passed on to us, and that are not going to betray the past, and that are going to give this country a 3rd century like the world has never seen before.
Thank you, Mr. Congressman.
Now to the very final purpose of this meeting, and that is to pass these resolutions that we will send to Congress and say, Mr. Lawmakers, these are the things that we believe. For the sake of time, I'm going to omit all of the whereases and just get to the therefore be it resolved and see if you want to approve these things, because all of you have already read these, you have already signed them, and we certainly are not asking you to sign them twice, but we want you now by voice vote to express your approval of the resolutions that will be sent to Washington. Does this represent your viewpoint? Therefore be it resolved that the Congress enact and the states ratify a mandatory human life amendment to the Constitution to protect all persons born and unborn from conception. The next one, therefore be it resolved that preschool child development programs shall be controlled by the private sector, giving parents freedom of choice over the physical and philosophical environment of their children. All in favor say aye. Be it resolved that we oppose the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. All in favor say aye. All right, therefore be it resolved that homosexuality, lesbianism, or prostitution shall not be taught, glorified, or otherwise promoted as acceptable through the laws of society, through the adoption of children, or within the institutions such as our schools. All in favor say aye. We send this message to the President. We send this message to our congressmen. And these resolutions will be actually taken to them at another time which is yet to be decided.
From the mountains to the prairies.